Well, good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. I'm so glad that you've joined us this morning. We have a lot to cover. We're going to be talking about, of course, the Harris campaign. We'll be talking about the Trump campaign. We also have some updates here in New York, and former Governor Cuomo making the news again, giving a speech at a church that many have seen as a signal of, is he going to run for mayor of New York City? Now, many have said he wants to, though it'll be kind of disappointing for him coming off as governor. We'll talk about that. But first, Hezbollah fired its deepest barrage into Israel since the beginning of the current war, with 4 rounds of over 150 rockets, cruise missiles, and drones fired into the Jezreel Valley in the early hours of Sunday yesterday. Alerts were sounded. Now, Israel has now bombed Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. The Israeli military launched its most widespread wave of airstrikes against Iran-backed Hezbollah, simultaneously targeting Lebanon's south, eastern Bakia Valley, and northern region near Syria in nearly a year of conflict. Asked by reporters about a possible Israeli ground incursion into Lebanon, Daniel Hagari said, quote, "We will do whatever is needed in order to return evacuated residents of northern Israel to their homes safely, a war priority for the Israeli government." The latest attacks come amid some of the heaviest cross-border exchanges of fire and a conflict raging alongside the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. Now, we have learned that the Biden White House, which we're going to get to in just a little bit, the Biden White House is looking, I guess, to tie again the hands of Israel. Over the weekend on the State of the Union on CNN, Senator Tom Cotton gave an interview, and again, just the anger and the aggressiveness of the questions that are asked of Tom Cotton, of J.D. Vance. You can no longer say, I mean, the idea of the nonstop fact checking throughout the interview. It's tough to watch. But Cotton said a lot of attention has been focused over the last 11 months, rightly so, on Hamas to the south. But I think many Americans probably don't appreciate just how much Hezbollah from Lebanon has been striking into Israel. Israel has every right to defend itself and to go on offensive against a terrorist organization in Lebanon. And we need to give them the tools to defeat both Hamas in the south and Hezbollah in the north and defend their own people. So Jake Tapper, who was aggressive during this interview, said, "Is the United States not giving tools that Israel needs?" Cotton said, no, they're not. First of all, they're not giving them the political and diplomatic support that they need from the very beginning. If rather than trying to put constant pressure on Israel, more pressure than we put on Iran and its terrorist networks, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris had simply adopted a policy to let Israel win and back them to the hilt, the war and Hamas probably would have ended a long time ago. Yes, we've continued to tie their hands, slow them down, and then the audacity of the Biden administration saying that they're taking too long. Remember, there was the ceasefire, and this is different. We're talking about Hezbollah here, but there was the ceasefire on October 6th. So this idea that there has to be a ceasefire and this negotiation, as Senator Cotton saying, if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris had simply adopted a policy to let Israel win and back them to the hilt, the war and Hamas probably would have ended a long time ago. And Governor Doug Burgum, if you recall, he was at one point kind of on the short list for VP for Donald Trump. On Fox News Sunday, host Shannon Bream said the argument is that President Trump has good arguments against her, meaning Harris, on all of those issues. Do you talk to him about strategy? Is he willing to be more focused on the issues, or does he see a need for that? Burgum said, well, I think we know that. And the voters know that President Trump, if we're talking about the economy was super strong under President Trump, and it's been awful under Biden-Harris interest rates, inflation, the cost of home price, of food, price of gasoline. President Trump wins on those, on national security. All these issues we talked about, literally, he's a deterrent. This is the important point, ready? If you want to see the hostages come home, vote for Donald Trump, because we will see exactly like we did with Jimmy Carter left office on the first day Ronald Reagan, the hostages came home. That will happen again because Iran knows that President Trump will be coming with sanctions and with things that will put them back where they were before when he was in office. So if you want to see the hostages come home, according to Governor Burgum, you vote for Donald Trump. Now, on some other quick international issues, we also can talk about this the last week to avert a government shutdown. Do you think there'll be a government shutdown? Do you think that Mike Johnson's current plan, and we'll talk about it in depth, will pass the House? But a couple of other international stories. It's kind of going back to the Cold War. Russia is using Mexico as a hub for spying on the U.S. Now, we talked about the real serious threat of Russia, Iran, and China, one that Washington does not seem to want to take seriously. Russian intelligence services are building up their presence in Mexico for spy operations targeting the United States, a return to Cold War tactics by an increasingly aggressive regime. That's according to U.S. officials and former intelligence officers. Russia has added dozens of personnel to its embassy staff in Mexico City in the past few years, even though Moscow has only limited trade ties with the country. U.S. officials said the trend is concerning and believe the extensive buildup is aimed at bolstering the Kremlin's intelligence operations targeting the U.S., as well as its propaganda efforts aimed at undermining Washington and Ukraine. Russia has really invested in Mexico in terms of seeking to extend their presence. The Biden administration has raised the issue with the Mexican government. Now, the Mexican embassy and the Russian embassy did not respond to a request for comment. CIA Director William Burns said earlier this month his agency and the U.S. government are sharply focused on Russia's expanded footprint in Mexico, which he said was partly the result of Russian spies being expelled from foreign capitals after Moscow's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. One other update, as we just mentioned, Ukraine. Zelensky is in the U.S., and he's going to explain his war plan to both Biden, Harris, and Trump. He arrived yesterday in the United States for a crucial visit to present Kiev's plan to end 2.5 years of war with Russia. Zelensky will present his proposal, which he calls a victory plan, to President Joe Biden, as well as presidential hopefuls Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Now, this is after a summer of intense fighting, with Moscow advancing fast in eastern Ukraine and Kiev, holding on to swaths of Russia's Kursk region. Yeah, we're moving fast this morning. I wanted to get to some of the international stories. A couple other things. Yes, I will be giving you an update on the Alzheimer's Walk. It was on Saturday. I don't want to give too much away. We'll tell you all about it in one of the breaks. Also, I didn't even mention yet. A little bit later on in the program, we'll be talking with Nancy Ryan. She's the Director of Development of the Finger Lakes Donor Recovery. I know we talked about Donate Life quite frequently when Assemblyman Phil Palmisano is on. That's a topic that's near and dear to his heart, and I'm sure we'll talk to him in the future about it as well. But Nancy Ryan is going to join us in the 7 o'clock hour. Okay, one other story. Oh man, I got these out of order. What did I do here? Yes, going back to, I thought I had another couple things on Israel. Israel's on the brink of a full-scale invasion of South Lebanon as it warns back down or else. Sorry about that. I forgot that I had a few more updates on Israel. An expert warns that Israel's pager attack could serve as a precursor to a full-scale invasion. And we talked about this last week. The pager attack was a wink, wink. You better, if we could do this, you better stand down. These attacks will have a large impact on Hezbollah's ability to coordinate a response to Israel's escalation by disrupting their communications network. Also, Israel is currently probing whether Hamas leader and October 7th mastermind Yahya Sinwar has been killed. The Israeli military is investigating whether the Hamas chief and considered the October 7th mastermind, Sinwar, may have been killed in a recent airstrike on Gaza. Some media claim Sinwar may have been killed or wounded in one of the most recent bombings in an unspecified part of the Gaza Strip. Now, we know he's been he's been hiding out. You know, after you have the cell phone taking out a leader, then you have this pagers attack. Wow, what an amazing... well, we'll find out. I'm sure we'll find out. Officials with the Israeli Intelligence Agency and Israel Defense Forces said there is no new evidence to suggest that Sinwar is dead, but that they are continuing to investigate the possibility. Questions have swirled about Sinwar's fate because the Hamas chief supposedly went radio silent during continued airstrikes in Gaza. It is all hopes and guesses, which are based on the fact that Sinwar has been incommunicado in recent weeks, said an Israeli official. One other thing before we go to break. Netanyahu spoke after the most recent attacks, and this is after Hezbollah lobbed 150 rockets into Israel. He did not specifically refer to the pager attacks. Now, this has been one of the kind of the interesting things about the pager attack, that no one technically has taken credit. He delivered an English version of the statement, which had some modifications from the Hebrew, but this is what he said. On October 7th, the Hamas terrorist monsters burst into Israel, murdered our people, raped and beheaded our women, burnt babies alive, and took 255 innocent people hostage, including many Americans. A day later, on October 8th, another Iranian terrorist proxy, Hezbollah, attacked Israel completely unprovoked. They fired missiles and rockets into our city. They made 60,000 Israelis leave their home along the Lebanon border, becoming refugees in their own land. In the subsequent months, they've stopped for a single day attacking us. They haven't stopped for a single day attacking us. No country can accept the wanton rocketing of its cities. We can't accept it either. We will take whatever action is necessary to restore security and to bring our people safe back to their homes. Boy, Netanyahu, I know the media loves to hate Netanyahu. I don't think you could have had a better leader at this time of this kind of conflict than Benjamin Netanyahu. Okay, we're just getting warmed up. We are going to get to the presidential race. I have one update, kind of a local update here from Congressman Nick Langworthy. As I mentioned, we'll tell you about the Alzheimer's Walk. Thank you again to everybody who donated. And we'll hear from Nancy Ryan in the 7 o'clock hour about Donate Life. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking after this. And we are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Thank you so much for joining us. This came out on Friday, and it got some attention nationwide, but I wanted to mention it to you quickly in case you missed it. Congressman Nick Langworthy and Chairman Comer launched investigations into potential fraud linked to Act Blue campaign contributions. This was on Friday. Act Blue has been funneling questionable donations into Democratic campaigns for far too long, raising serious concerns about fraud and illegal contributions. That's why I've launched a new investigation alongside Chairman Comer and House Oversight Committee, said Congressman Langworthy. We can't tolerate shady practices, foreign interference, and blatant exploitation of our campaign finance laws. The American people deserve to know who's really behind these contributions. Now, the lawmakers wrote a letter to Department of Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, saying the Committee on Oversight and Accountability is investigating reports of potential fraudulent and illicit financial activity related to contributions to campaigns of candidates for federal offices mediated by online fundraising platforms like Act Blue. The committee writes to request the U.S. Department of the Treasury make available to the committee certain suspicious activity reports relevant to the committee's investigation. Recent reports about Act Blue raise concerns about the threat of fraud and invasion of campaign finance law by individuals exploiting online contribution platforms. Act Blue has not implemented standard procedures to guard against identity theft and fraud, such as requiring a card verification value, CVV, to process online transactions until it received criticism for not doing so. Act Blue is also being investigated by several state officials in relation to contributions allegedly made through the platform fraudulently without the reported contributors' awareness. Federal law prohibits contributions made in the name of another person. So we'll keep you updated on that, but Congressman Langworthy and Chairman Comer launching that investigation. Okay, so Miranda Devine asks a question from over the weekend. Who exactly is running the country? It certainly appears to be Jill Biden and not Joe. President Biden had kind of a rough go. I think it was on Friday at that summit where he snapped at staffers and he fumbled through, not knowing who he was supposed to introduce. He was supposed to call India's prime minister to the stage, but appeared to be unsure which of the three visiting heads of government he was meant to name. He got a little testy with his staff there. But anyway, so Miranda Devine asked the question, who exactly is running the country? It's easy to forget because he's usually invisible, but we still have Joe Biden as president for 4 months. And we know he said he was going to work right up to the end, yet we've seen quite a bit of vacation time, a lot of pictures from on the beach. That's a scary prospect, 4 months, considering his obvious cognitive decline. He spent almost half his presidency on vacation and being shielded from scrutiny. but the situation is rapidly getting worse. And polls show that people realize that Kamala Harris was in on this kind of scandal, if you will, covering up his mental health. Something the media does not really report on, does not really want to talk about the fact that obviously Joe Biden was booted out by his own party because of this mental decline. The fate of the free world should not be left in the hands of a man who can't remember where he is or what he's meant to be doing at any given moment. And she references specifically that press conference or that summit meeting when he literally says at one point, "Who am I introducing next? Who's next?" He yells at his staff. The whole thing was an embarrassment, starting with the fact that the leaders were not being hosted with dignity at the White House. Instead, were housed at the rundown Hotel DuPont in Biden's hometown and had to hold their summit at Archmere Academy, the posh Catholic prep school Biden attended while his younger brothers had to content themselves with a local public school. At least the Quad leaders got individual tours of Joe's palatial estate, which had been off limits to the media due to fascinating speculations about how the self-described poorest man in Congress could afford such luxury. Remember, that was one of the, when they always talk about empathy and didn't have, and he wasn't rich. In photographs, we get a glimpse of the grandeur of the custom-built wood panel library where Joe had those classified documents, if you recall, dating back to his Senate days, for which he never was held accountable because special counsel Robert Hur thought he was too old and forgetful for a jury to convict. But remember, there was outrage at Robert Hur at the time. How dare he say that? It was lies. And then we saw, of course, the debate, and it all started to unravel. But why was this important meeting being held in Wilmington at all? The White House patched up a story about Biden wanting to show off his hometown, but he's never had the urge before, and quite honestly, there's not much to show off. More likely, it was the White House was already booked out for the self-aggrandizement of the relentlessly ambitious First Lady. On Friday, Jill Biden was hosting a glitzy party for the cast of The West Wing. So her speculation that it is Dr. Jill Biden who's actually running the White House, running things behind the scenes. Whether it's Jill or someone else running the country, the bottom line is we don't have a functional president. This is a constitutional crisis. Kamala Harris is most to blame because she has the constitutional duty as vice president to ensure the president's brain is not AWOL. She also knows more about Biden's cognitive decline than anyone apart from Jill and Hunter Biden. She has lunch with him on the regular basis and often is boasted of being the last person in the room when decisions are made. But she has been lying through her teeth to the American people about Biden's health, for instance, calling him bold and vibrant just back in February. Our president is in good shape, in good health, and he is ready to lead in our second term, she said. A few weeks later, she said not only is he absolutely have the authority in rooms around the globe, but in the Oval Office. But after that disastrous debate, she was still at it, insisting Biden might have a slow start, but he won with a strong finish. She lied to make sure Joe got through the Democratic primaries with all other challengers hobbled, so only she was left. All she had to do was run out the clock, much like she's doing now in her campaign. She would slide through with fake smiles and those phrases that she used so frequently and be anointed president, as has happened in every role she has ever had. Biden being forced out for re-election was not her preferred option, but the complicit media and the old Obama hands managed her are ensuring she escapes the traditional scrutiny we expect for a presidential candidate, such as, being asked questions, having press conferences. So who is actually running things behind the scenes? Now let's get into the presidential race. There's some polling information here that I think they're trying to push, like we've talked so often about, Harris's momentum. We've got a couple examples of that. Did you watch any of the Sunday morning shows? A lot of anger at the Republican guests. We're also going to talk a little bit here about New York State issues. We've got a lot to talk about. So let's take a short break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. And we are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. I'm your host, Frank Acom. Thank you so much for joining us. A couple comments from viewers here. This viewer notes that the real conspiracy is that they have done such a good job at media distractions, entertaining, and eye candy circuses. that they could tell you that it's a conspiracy theory, then lie to you about anything they want. The media is good at distractions. You see what, and you've heard me say this on the program quite frequently, it's more about what isn't reported than what is reported. Another comment from a viewer. Morning, Frank. Well, hey, good morning. I don't understand why Fox hasn't offered to host a debate. Let Kamala turn down a debate. I would be surprised if they didn't offer debate. I think it's become such common knowledge that a Democrat will never debate on Fox that it probably wasn't even reported that she turned it down. Because I'd be shocked if Fox didn't at least try to set up a debate, knowing full well that Kamala would never accept it. Next up, this is from Ken. Biden is obviously running the country. You must have seen him relaying information to the country from his little desk outside the Oval Office. I wonder if Harris is going to be relegated to that little desk. It does make one wonder who gets to actually sit at the Resolute desk. Thank you, Ken. All right, so the new polls, and listen to this headline coming from NBC. Newly popular Harris builds momentum in challenging Trump for the mantle of change. A double-digit increase in popularity, rising Democratic enthusiasm, and early edge for representing change have vaulted Harris forward and reshuffled the 2024 election. How can someone who's been in there 3.5 years be considered the kind of change agent? I'm just confused by that. With just over 6 weeks until Election Day, the poll finds that Harris with a 5-point lead over Donald Trump among registered voters, 49-44. While that result was in the margin of error, it's a clear shift from July's poll when Trump was ahead by 2 points before Joe Biden's exit. But the transformation in the presidential contest goes well beyond the horse race. For starters, Harris's favorability has jumped 16 points since July, the largest increase for any politician in NBC News polling since then President George W. Bush's standing surge after the 9/11 terrorist attack. We talked about this in the program. You're going to hear a lot about momentum. You're going to hear a lot about just running a beautiful campaign. They're not concerned in the media that she's ignoring them. They're not concerned that there's no real substance. Now, many, and we've heard even CNN reporting on this, that those still on the fence, they're not sure who, the undecided voter, they're not overly happy with the lack of specifics from the Harris campaign. But nonetheless, she is staying quiet, doing more local type interviews. I saw that she did give a quick comment on a tarmac somewhere. But okay, so that's one headline from CNN. Listen to this headline. Trump is getting wilder and wilder, but the White House race remains a toss-up. Democrats have bet the density of the White House on the premise that once, I think it means destiny, of the White House on the premise that once voters remember the chaos and divisiveness of Donald Trump's presidency, he'd suffer an election-defining slump. Wild weeks of outlandish rhetoric by the ex-president have revived memories of the cacophony of his 4 White House years and shattered perceptions that he's running a more disciplined campaign than in 2020 or 2016. But the nature of the race, a toss-up contest in swing states, has not budged. Then they use it, and this is Stephen Collinson from CNN, then they use this as an opportunity to just go after Trump for about 3 pages. Nothing really here of any kind of criticism of how Harris is running. Now we're going to talk, I don't want to go through any more of these polls, but they are saying it's the closest presidential race of the century, already predicting that we won't know who's won on night one. We'll talk about that in just a second. But this is the closest race for the White House in the past 60 years. Polling since the September 10th debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris show that while the vice president seems to have opened up a slight national edge over her Republican rival, the race remains well within the margin of error, I keep saying that weird this morning, and too close to call. This is especially the case when looking at the Electoral College. To put the new Sunday polls in a further context, consider all the national surveys conducted since the debate. This includes the aforementioned polls and surveys from ABC, Fox, and New York Times. On average, according to the latest CNN poll of polls, Harris is ahead by 3 points. This matches what we've seen all year. Neither candidate has been able to open up an advantage of 5 points or more in national polling. Now listen to this. Again, this is from CNN. Even Harris' dominating debate performance over Trump according to the voters, has only appeared to move the dial by a few points. Would you consider that a dominating debate? I mean, I know we heard from the same outlet, CNN, saying that many undecided voters were really concerned with the lack of substance coming from Harris, not giving specifics. You'd have to go back to the 1960 campaign to find a race in which the major party nominees were always within 5 points of each other in the average of the national polling. Every presidential year since then has had at least 3 weeks when one candidate was up by 5 points or more. A 3-point edge in the national polls is far from secure for Harris. Since 1948, the average difference between the polls on the eve of the election and the election day results has been 3 points. Some years, like 2020, the error rate was even higher. Well, one thing they've always said about Trump is he historically does not poll as well as he does when it comes to getting votes. And the reason for that is we talked about the stigma the media has created, that if you, a lot of people, I know a lot of people who will not answer polls truthfully. They don't want, people turning on you, being doxxed by the media. They don't want, their family, maybe their friends, their loved ones to learn that they're a Trump supporter. So they'll tell you one thing, and then at the end of the day, go into the voting booth where it's secret and pull that lever or mark that circle for Trump. It happened in 2016. It happened in 2020 that the numbers were not accurate because of people, again, being scared to admit, and you can understand why that they support Trump, because it has cost people relationships. It's cost people family members, friends, jobs, etc. So anyway, the bottom line is that this year's presidential race is as close as it could be. One tiny shift in either direction could make all the difference in the world. Now, Seth Bluestein, this also from CNN, a Republican city commissioner in vote-rich Philadelphia, put the odds of knowing the winner on election night at almost zero, saying it could actually take days to determine the winner. In battleground Wisconsin, meanwhile, a final tally isn't likely until the morning after the election, said Ann Jacobs, a Democrat who chairs the state's election commission. While several other states have moved to speed up the vote counts in the 4 years since the 2020 post-election chaos, political gridlock in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin has prevented a change that could have paved the way for earlier projections, the ability to begin opening and processing mail-in ballots before Election Day. Now, I've had a lot of people ask me this. Will you be early voting this year? I also have a piece here, and it kind of goes in line with what I've been saying. I don't want to jump to New York issues right yet, and we're not going to. But there's a piece that came out over the weekend asking, is New York really in play for Republicans in the presidential race? Analysts say no. We'll talk about that in just a moment. And that's just me being jaded, but the analysts are saying it as well. I hope we see a change. I mean, I don't know how we ever expect anything to get better in New York. And I'm just saying, just look at the numbers of the mass exodus of people from New York State. So I'm not the only one saying it. But I'll continue with this. Election observers worry that delays in counting mail ballots could give the public a false sense of who's winning the election. That could create a potential red mirage, showing GOP candidates ahead initially before more Democrat-leaning absentee ballots are processed and added to the tally, and leave an opening for false narratives about election fraud to flourish on as the country awaits the results. In Georgia, a controversial rule change approved Friday that requires workers to hand count the number of ballots cast at precincts on Election Day could delay the results of the presidential election in another key swing state. It's obviously a concern, Pennsylvania Secretary of State Al Schmidt, a Republican, said. That period of uncertainty is something that is exploited by bad faith actors to undermine the confidence in the outcome. Police officers stand between. Oh, hold on, that was a picture. So they're saying days long wait again. It could be days before we find out who actually won the White House. It's going to be interesting that night. And the idea, well, you add early voting, you add these absentees, and it's a shame that we can't get the results in a more timely fashion. Election experts around the country are urging voters to be patient and refrain from making any conclusions if the results aren't known quickly on election night. Quote, "We've got to stop this language that somebody's ahead or somebody's behind," said Moss, the Michigan state legislator. "The winner is the winner when the polls close. We then just find out who the winner is. Then I'm going to talk about New York when we come back. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. And we are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Thank you so much for joining us. Comment from a viewer. Who is doing these polls? What kind of skewed questions do they ask to get the results they want? You know I'm not a big fan of polls. Even if the polls show my chosen candidate ahead, they can manipulate polls so easily. They can use polls to kind of lull you into a sense of confidence, or there's just so many ways that they're misused. I do bring them to you occasionally, but it's more for a larger picture issue than it is to actually talk about a certain polling outlet's numbers. I wanted to remind you, and I think I did on Friday, but I wanted to remind you that the fall book sale is going on now. Hey, were you able to make it to any of the events this week? I know we had Harvest Fest. We had Heritage Fest. We had the book sale. So many things kicking off. The Alzheimer's Walk, which I'll talk to you about in just a little bit. But those are your days and times for the fall book sale for the Friends of the Southeast Steuben County Library. Today, 9 to 7 p.m. Highly recommend it. But keep that in mind. Cash or checks only, folks. But they have so many great opportunities for things to buy. And we know how expensive books can be if you buy them new. So that's why I wanted to pass that along to you. So is New York really in play for Republicans? According to, I think this is Newsday. The answer to them is no. Cook Political Report is calling New York State a solid blue. Democrat wins in the upcoming presidential election. So is Real Clear Politics, CNN, Siena College, and ABC News. So when Donald Trump sought to portray New York as in play during his recent visit, analysts said it was more about pumping up supporters and donors and trying to help down-ballot Republicans in local races rather than give an accurate lay of the land. New York is most definitely not in play. Trump always says this, said Larry Sabato, a political scientist at the University of Virginia. Look, he said this in 2016, he said this in 2020, but lost by more than 20 points each time. There's no one in the business I'm in who thinks it's in play or has evidence it's in play. It's delusional, said Lawrence Levy. I don't know. I mean, listen, I know we've talked about it on the program. I am jaded by New York politics. So in my opinion, it will go Democrat. But you look at the way that he packs in people at rallies in New York. It's quite remarkable. The latest New York poll was published by Siena on Thursday, finding Harris leading Trump by 13 percentage points. On a related note, the poll aggregator site 270 to Win considers New York likely Democrat rather than solid because the poll margin is in less than 15 points. I've got to say, it is impressive, though, even at 13 points. I know he was in the single digits against Biden. So that's always, that right there is a huge indicator. I mean, I'm jaded, but I don't think it's in any way, shape, or form time to give up. If I were a Republican, I wouldn't invest a lot of money in the presidential race in New York, Greenberg said. Further, the reality is both campaigns will spend money in the swing states that likely will determine the outcome. The contest is a total dogfight in states that will actually matter in the presidential race. And I think Trump's time would be better used campaigning in those states. All right. So what are your thoughts? What are you feeling out there on the street? Now, when we come back from our break, perhaps you saw the news that Kamala Harris is going to skip the Al Smith dinner. We had made that prediction a couple of weeks ago. Kind of, as a matter of fact, we talked about it so long ago, it kind of fell off my radar. She has turned down that opportunity. We're going to talk about that, what that means. We also, I know you probably don't want to, but there's some definitely newsworthy announcements about former Governor Cuomo that we'll be talking about, some New York issues. And then at the end of the program, if we have time, just a couple of quick pieces that I can't really find a way to segue to, but that we'll try to get to. Also, I am going to show you some pictures from the Walk to End Alzheimer's at Watkins Glen International this Saturday. We had a fun time. The weather held out. We because of potential lightning and thunder, we could only walk I think it was 1.5 miles, something like that, not do the full track. It did end up raining as soon as we pretty much got off the course, but it was still a fun event. Great crowd, raised good money for a great cause. So we'll tell you about that as well. Also, did you make it to any of the events this weekend that we had promoted? Heritage Fest, Harvest Fest, the book sale. If you did, I'd love to hear from you how your weekend went, because for whatever reason, the 21st was maybe the busiest day of the whole year when it comes to local events. I think it was Big Flat. Was it Big Flats Community Day? Somewhere else, too. And then in the 7 o'clock hour, we'll be talking with Nancy Ryan, the Director of Development, Finger Lakes Donor Recovery. Donate Life, a topic we've discussed numerous times with Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. Okay, stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Casting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Thank you so much for joining us. A couple of comments from viewers. If either Harris or Trump wins the election, I can see the country dividing even further and talks of states succeeding, intensifying, or the right will simply quietly accept defeat and watch as biblical prophecy rolls out. Mainstream media puts our fate at the head of a pin and continue to compete for ratings while the last violin plays or until the last ember of the American experience burns out. Well, the media has something to gain, obviously, from dividing us. That's why we see the Sunday shows, just the anger at the, and this is, I say Sunday shows because it's been more prevalent lately, but it's on all outlets. Whenever you see a Republican being interviewed, hosts and commentators no longer even hide their disdain for those politicians. Another comment. Frank, the Dems lie about Trump's policies and hundreds of other topics. The FBI lied on Russia, the Hunter laptop, and many other issues. The Justice Department lies to bring lawfare to the political world. The legacy media lies to demonize the Republicans and bolster the Democrats. The candidates lie to get elected. It was a debate, remember? That's what Harris said when asked about calling her now boss a bigot during that debate back in 2019. She said it was a debate, meaning it's okay to lie during a debate. And continuing, why would anyone put any stock in political polls? Thanks, Ken. That's a great point. I don't put stock in polls. We mention it sometimes as part of the larger picture of the article, but polls have never, even if they've been in my, quote, my favor, quote unquote, they've still never impressed me. Okay, so Kamala Harris is going to skip the traditional Al Smith dinner, which is the first time a presidential candidate has ducked the charity event since 1984. Harris has decided to dodge former President Trump and skip this year's Al Smith dinner, a major election year event that generations of candidates have attended, becoming the first presidential hopeful to duck out since the failed presidential wannabe Walter Mondale back in 1984. Now, if you never watched this Al Smith dinner, it normally takes on the feeling of a roast. You know, they go after each other, good-hearted, go after each other. Some were critical of how much Trump went after Hillary Clinton, and maybe that's where the fear comes from for Harris. We also know Harris isn't good on spontaneous issues. What I don't quite understand, though, is this is normally very scripted. You normally have writers that come up with the jokes. There was speculation that I think it was Romney, but it might have been the first time with Trump that Dennis Miller, the former Saturday Night Live comedian, had helped him prepare with some jokes. And we know that Hollywood really helped Obama. Well, I'll be honest, I like these type of things. I like when a candidate can poke fun at their opponent and at themselves. It's kind of like the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I think that one's a little bit overblown, but I like that kind of old celebrity roast style, I'll be the first to admit. While Trump has agreed to go to the 79th Al Smith dinner on October 17th, Harris's camp says she will instead campaign in key battleground states on the final stretch before Election Day. It's been a tradition for both presidential candidates to attend the dinner, at which the contenders take turns giving speeches roasting each other, since Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy appeared together back in 1960, which sat going back to this being the closest election since, they said, 1960. We are disappointed that she, meaning Harris, will not be with us, as this is an evening of unity and putting aside political differences in support of a good cause of helping women and children in need, regardless of race, creed, or background. We hope she reconsiders. Now, the news broke of this, and there was some criticism of Harris because, again, she's giving so few opportunities for the American voter and American people to see her. So there was definitely some criticism. So what did she do? She came out and the headline read, Harris accepts, this is how the media works, Harris accepts another debate. Well, the real story is Trump didn't. But this was a distraction from the Al Smith dinner, saying and giving her the opportunity to attack Trump, saying he's scared or we won last time, so now he's scared. You can see this stuff a mile away. But Trump, and we'll get to it a little bit later on, has still not agreed to do another debate. Harris's team told organizers that she would be willing to attend the dinner as president of the United States if elected, though. So there is a fear here. There's a scare. She is scared. Because this isn't a debate format. This is an opportunity for both candidates to poke fun at each other. The Alfred E. Smith Memorial Foundation dinner, first held in 1946, rakes in millions of dollars each year to support people in need in the Big Apple. If there's ever been a time where there's a lot of people in need, I've got startling statistics about the homelessness rate up under the Biden-Harris administration. Harris will be the first to decline an invitation since Jimmy Carter's vice president, Walter Mondale, declined back in 1984 when he ran a losing campaign against President Ronald Reagan. And a real losing campaign. What was that? I want to say Reagan won all 49 states. I think they just gave Mondale his home state just to make it look not as bad. Trump made that notable appearance back in 2016 going after Hillary Clinton. Some were critical of him at that time, but that's nothing new. The dinner, well, you don't have to go through all that. Now, the New York Post editorial board, yeah, I'm doing fine on time. Oh, wow, look, a lot of comments coming in. The Post editorial board says, ouch. It seems Kamala Harris is so afraid of having to be spontaneous in public that she's skipping this year's Al Smith dinner, a charity event that raises millions for the city's unfortunate. The dinner has hosted the major party rivals every 4 years, with just two exceptions, since 1960, when Richard Nixon dared to join John Kennedy, the first Catholic presidential nominee since Al Smith himself, on Catholic turf. The candidates are supposed to deliver light jabs at each other in their dueling addresses, which plainly can be written in advance. But the program apparently has too many risks of being called upon for spontaneous reactions for Harris to agree to it. The Democratic nominee has done vastly fewer non-teleprompter events than any past major party candidate. One of her allies claims Harris is just too busy, though that's never stopped a sitting president from attending. Yes, she's just too busy when sitting presidents have been there, presidential candidates have been there since the 60s. Kamala says she will do the Smith dinner in the future if she wins in November. Is that a carrot or a stick? They ask. As for those exceptions, one came in 1996 when the then Cardinal opted to invite neither nominee, presumably because President Bill Clinton had vetoed a bill that banned abortions of babies already partly out of the mother. That could be Harris's concern now, since she and running mate Tim Walz support unlimited abortion rights all the way through the 9th month of pregnancy. Walz even signed a bill ensuring that babies born despite an attempted abortion would have no protections. But more likely, it's just her fear of having to be spontaneous. After all, she just bungled a friendly conversation with Oprah Winfrey, who endorsed her. Yes, and if you watched it, it was not that good. I know the media highlighted it because of the Oprah aspect, but it was not what you would say was a clear and precise interview. That phobia must be pretty crippling. Harris has to know that the only other exception came when Walter Mondale declined the invite back in 1984 and went on to lose 49 states in November. All right, let's take a short break. What do you think? I know in the scheme of things, it's not the biggest issue, but it shows a common trend. It shows that Harris will not do anything that puts her kind of awkwardness, if you will, on display. Her kind of word salads or some of the phrases she uses, the awkward laughing sometimes, does not want that on full display. So if it's not telepromptered, she's really not interested in doing it, or even with a friendly interview like with Oprah Winfrey. But in that situation, as I said here, even that did not go all too smooth. So let's take a short break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. And we are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street Corning. Thank you so much for joining us. Coming up in just a few moments, we're going to hear from Nancy Ryan, the Director of Development of the Finger Lakes Donor Recovery. We're also going to take a look at the Alzheimer's Walk on Saturday, show you a couple pictures. We had a great time. Let's go to a couple of comments from viewers. Let's not forget the Democrats call for toning down the rhetoric. Yes, they do. And then you'll see, like Hillary Clinton say, election will be between dark, dystopian Trump And the level of energy, even joy. Yes, she's still trying to push the joy thing. Hillary is. They've kind of walked it back a little bit, it seems like, with the Harris campaign. But continuing, another comment from a different viewer. Hate will divide us to a third world country. Divide and a nation falls. Over and over in history, a nation falls when it is divided. Good point. Thank you very much. Another comment from a viewer. This is from Ken. They must be worried about Trump's possibilities in New York City, or the Dems and Soros wouldn't have spent the money to organize an anti-Trump rally outside of Trump Tower over the weekend, saying how much New York City hates Trump. They've got to be concerned with the size of his rallies. I mean, I know that piece said there's no way, but when you look at Trump being within even 13 points in New York is quite remarkable. But, oh man, we are out of time. Where did today's first hour of today's show go? Unbelievable. Hillary Clinton said on Fareed Zakaria GPS that the election in November is between dark, it's dystopian, former President Donald Trump, and joyful Kamala Harris. This again, Hillary Clinton. When President Biden withdrew and endorsed the vice president, I immediately, along with my husband, endorsed her as well. And it felt right. It felt exciting, exhilarating. I think she's not only absolutely equipped and ready to be president, I think we need somebody like her right now. This is an election not just between two people, two tickets, two parties. It really is an election, two parties. It really is an election between democracy and autocracy, freedom and oppression. But also between, I think that should read is. But also between leadership that wants to bring us together to do big things, to demonstrate contrast between the two visions of our future, or to demonstrate America is ready to be as and leading abroad because the world needs that. So the contrast between the two visions of our future could not be more stark and different. I think Kamala's campaign has demonstrated, as it already has been writing and talked about, a level of energy, even joy. To the contrast is the Trump campaign, which is it's dark, it's dystopian. It's filled with attacks on different kinds of people, finger pointing and scapegoating. That's a very different view of who we are as people and what we should inspire to be. So that's Hillary Clinton again. But yes, toning down the rhetoric. Oh, keep those waves coming in. Thank you so much. So we've got a lot to talk about in the next hour, and we're going to be talking with Nancy Ryan, the Director of Development at the Finger Lakes Donor Recovery. That's about Donate Life, so make sure that you stay tuned for that. We're also going to show you a little bit about the walk to end Alzheimer's. That'll just be a quick thing. We've got more here on the Harris campaign. I know a lot of people are talking, I'm not sure if you saw it, where Walz essentially endorsed Trump, not really meaning to, but saying we can't go back to these 4 years or something. I'll bring it up to you here in just a little bit, but a lot of people teasing him. Walz is, I don't know, I kind of makes you uncomfortable, doesn't he? A little awkward out there, a little over the top. I'm not really sure what to think. I haven't seen as much of him as I have Vance, but that's a part of the game plan, remember. Less interviews and the like. But we got to go. We got to take a break. 1 hour left together. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Hour number 2 of Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I am your host, Frank Acom. Thank you so much for joining us as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here in the historic Gaffer District here on Marcus Street in Corning. Were you able to attend any of the events? Heritage Fest, Harvest Fest, the book sale? I'd love to hear from you. Here is a comment from a viewer. The Democrats keep saying that they need somebody like her. They already have her. She's already the vice president. That goes into what Walz was saying. Well, let's go to it. I didn't mean to jump to this, but Coach Walz, during a speech in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, he was discussing gun violence when he became distracted by an audience member who appeared to need water. So he strayed from his speech a little bit. Things like we did in Minnesota to have enhanced background checks and red flag laws to get guns out of there, to make a difference. And I still got my guns to go shoot pheasants in a couple weeks. We need some water. He stops us to check on somebody. Around 2 minutes later, the Democrat brought attention back to the race and began criticizing Trump and Vance. I'll bring her home here quick. Look, folks, Kamala Harris made it clear these guys want to instill fear. They want to tell you that you should just get over it. It's a fact of life. This is the way it is. Harris simply has said it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. We can't afford 4 more years of this. And then, of course, he segued into Project 2025, which they're pushing very strongly. Now, you're informed, you've done the research, you know Project 2025 is not Trump's idea. Some other group came up with it. He has said he hasn't even read it. He doesn't know what's in it, but they're trying to push this Project 2025. So this idea that we can't afford 4 more years of this is to ignore the fact that Harris has been in there for nearly 4 years. And again, I think to Scott Jennings' point as CNN, 12 out of the last 16 years, the White House has been controlled by a Democrat. So all this talk of we can't go back, all of these, it's been Democrats. One person wrote on Twitter, oh, wow, he's campaigning for Trump now, meaning Walz. I'm with him and Tim, Donald Trump Jr. jokingly replied. Walz finally tells the truth. We can't afford 4 more years of Kamala Harris. Yes, well, he's awkward. He's got that folksy, they try to say, folksy charm. How does it come off to you? I don't want to sound like I'm loading the question here. How does it come off to you? You know, when Biden used to say malarkey or come on, man, it may have got annoying because it happened so much, but you know it's how he talked. You know he was saying those things behind closed doors. Some of the ways that Walz speaks was almost like he was counseled on when to say it and force it in there. I don't know. To me, it just comes off disingenuous. It doesn't come off as real necessarily. But then again, the media hasn't had any opportunity to really question him. He's the same as Harris. They're both mysteriously quiet when it comes to media coverage. So we don't really know how he would be spontaneously, though it looks like there, when thrown off message a little bit, his spontaneous nature is about like Harris's. Saying again that we can't afford 4 more years of this. This being, he's trying to say Trump, but what is this? This would be the Biden-Harris years. Oh, by the way, did you see they unveiled not unveiled, that's not the right word. They unearthed a new video, and it was actually from The Tonight Show, where Harris essentially was reveling in, celebrating the fact that she wants to ban fracking. Climate change is the single greatest threat facing our world today. That's why I'm committed to passing a Green New Deal, creating clean jobs, and finally putting an end to fracking once and for all. This was on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. Harris, who at the time was a California senator and running for the Democrat nomination for president, touted her support for such a ban at other points as well in that campaign, including a CNN town hall where they asked her if she wants to ban fracking, and she said no question. So now she has to do a complete flip-flop from 2019 and say that she supports fracking. Why? Because she needs Pennsylvania. The White House goes through Pennsylvania, essentially, the road to the White House. So now she's scared that people there will say, wait a minute, I could be out of a job. I could lose money from my land, etc. So now she has to say she's done a complete 180. They're saying evolving, right? Well, she evolved on the issue, which only works if you're a Democrat. You're only told you evolved on an issue if you're a Democrat. What I have seen is that we can grow and we can increase a clean energy economy without banning fracking, she has now said. But boy, she celebrated in it. And I think if you're our PA friends, you've got to keep that in mind. I think it would be, no matter what she says in her campaign, because remember, it's just like she said when she called her former or her current boss a bigot, and then they asked about it after the fact, and she said, well, that was a debate, meaning it's okay to lie during a debate. Don't you think these flip-flops, these 180s, what Harris are you really going to get if she's in the White House on day one? Do you think she'll stand strong on her, I'm no longer for banning fracking, or do you think at the end of the day, she goes back to 2019 Harris? I think we all have our gut feeling on that. But yes, this was an appearance back in September of 2019 on The Tonight Show, recently unearthed again. People may have forgotten that she was on there. Okay. How about this? I've got more on Harris. I've got some more on Trump. But before that, let's talk about the walk to end Alzheimer's. First of all, I've got a couple props to show you. Oh, I broke something. Not props, but first of all, because of all of your great donations, and we raised a lot of money for Team Big Fox, because of you, the viewer. Thank you so much. They gave us my Champion Club membership. Pretty nice, huh? And then, look at this. My medal. The Walk to End Alzheimer's Champion Club medal. Yes, because I raised a certain amount for the team. Thanks to you, all the great viewers out there that donated, that I was a part of the Champion Club because I made it over a certain money amount. So we walked around. Well, we didn't get to do the whole track like originally thought because of weather. So we got to do I think it was about a mile and a half, something like that. Then the weather really turned. Here's our team. If I am ready. There we go. There's our team. Team Big Fox. You can see the storm brewing overhead. There we are as well. Proud company team, Big Fox man here. And then there I am up on the champion list. Frank Acom. That's because of you. Thank you so much. We really did have a good time, and it was for a great cause. And I can't thank you enough to everyone who donated. We did a good job. We were one of the highest fundraising teams there. I don't know what the final numbers are. They're supposed to email that to us at some point. But that was just my opportunity, other than I wanted to show you this great medal. But to also thank everyone who made those donations. It went to a great cause. So thank you very much. All right, let's take our first break of this hour. And then when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about Harris's campaign. Again, I do have Nancy Ryan coming up right around 7:20. We'll be reading your comments throughout the morning, so stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. And we are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. Let's go through a few comments. Oh, and thank you to for the wave. Here, I wanted to say it there. The wave using a fancy, what do they call it, GIF? Forrest Gump waving to me. Made me laugh. Thank you very much. Congratulations on your award. Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, that's our award from the Alzheimer's Association. And our Walk to End Alzheimer's. It's a really nice award. I'm going to have it here on my desk. Next up, this viewer thinks both Harris and Walz are disingenuous. To me, their handlers are watching Trump, stealing what they can from Trump's rhetoric, then injecting it into their campaign, but not the other way around. And you raised a good point, of course, specifically the no tax on tips. Remember that article, just to show you how bad the media is. When Harris comes out and steals Trump's idea with the no tax on tips, I can't remember the outlet. I wish I could. The outlet said a large majority of Republicans support Harris's plan. And as so many people said, yeah, because it was Trump's plan. Going again to show you how the media operates. Speaking of that, they treat Kamala, this viewer says, a different viewer, they treat Kamala like she hasn't already been part of the government. Absolutely. It's shocking. If it were so frustrating, even Tim Walz saying we can't go back to these 4 years, meaning he meant Trump, but making it sound like he was talking about Harris. Yeah, you're to ignore the fact that she's been there 3.5 years. So when she says on day one, I'm going to do this, like so many others have pointed out, why not do it now? If you know there's something that's going to help the American people and their pocketbook, why would you make them suffer for 4 more months if you could do it today? Right? But again, thank you for all the comments. Keep them coming in. Thank you to the person congratulating on my award. I did not expect it, but we raised enough to receive that medal. And we did our walk, so it was nice. This is an interesting, some are calling it a red flag. The National Treasury Employees Union, a union that represents various federal agents, including those of the International Revenue Service, put out a statement this week praising Harris for increasing the IRS budget and endorsing her for president. A conservative commentator, Joe Manarino, said the IRS Agents Union just endorsed Kamala Harris. That should tell you what her plans are for us. Get ready to be taxed to death. Vote Trump, he said. Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz warned of the Biden-Harris administration's further plans to expand the IRS, writing in a September Fox News op-ed, now the Biden-Harris administration's 2025 budget proposal calls for an additional $104 billion for the IRS. That's 8 times the annual budget just 2 years after Congress appropriated an amount that was 7 times the agency's annual budget. What is going on here? Yes, many red flags. If the IRS, the FBI, Wall Street, Iran, Putin, the military-industrial complex, the New York Times, Iran, 100 former McCain interns, and Dick Cheney all want one candidate to win, then vote for the other one. Prominent libertarian being libertarian, wrote, all the worst people in the world are endorsing Kamala. Weird. IRS agents endorsed Kamala with a lot of red flag emojis. Yes, keep that in mind, folks. Something to keep in mind. Now, I mentioned this earlier in the program. The U.S. homelessness numbers have exploded after hitting record last year as migrants flood the streets. The pictures are troubling. You've probably even seen this homelessness affect your local communities. Illegal migrants flooding the U.S. are contributing to what could be the highest number of homeless in the country since the data was first recorded, with cities draining their coffers to fund shelters. At least 550,000 people were reported homeless in January. The same month, the U.S. notched the highest number ever of border crossings, according to analysis by the Wall Street Journal. The disturbing homeless figure was at least 10% more than January of 2023, a year that had the highest overall annual tally since 2007. And what's always interesting about this, if this were a Republican president, every newspaper, every newscast would show soup lines for the soup kitchen. They'd be highlighting it. But because it's the Biden-Harris campaign, you most likely are just hearing about it here for the first time, other than you experiencing it. And I'm sure they'll say, no, never mind what you're experiencing. Never mind those numbers. The real numbers show that it's all hunky-dory. The past January's tally will presumably end up even higher, since not every city, including the Big Apple, which has a significant homeless population, has reported its data to the government yet. Given the trend, the country's on track to surpass 2023's overall dismal historic U.S. homelessness figures of 653,000. The hordes of homeless have swelled along with the record number of migrants illegally crossing the border and then claiming asylum and being bused to cities such as New York, Chicago, Boston, and Denver, straining public coffers and bringing crime and gang violence to the streets. And we've talked about that gang violence recently. It's come up quite frequently. Reports from Massachusetts reveal that migrants accounted for almost half of the more than 7,000 families in the state's family shelters in January. The state expects to spend more than $1 billion housing migrants this fiscal year. Migrants also accounted for more than 7 out of 10 homeless people in the city of Chicago, whose counts tripled to more than 18,800 people on the street and in shelters that month. But again, this is not something the media is reporting on. This is not something being tied to Biden and Harris like it should be, because it does not fit that narrative, especially in a presidential election year. Now, I had mentioned Harris is not going to the Al Smith dinner. There's a little criticism of her because of that. So what did she do? She stepped out and said, I've accepted the offer by CNN to do a second presidential debate. So the headline read, Harris agrees to debate. But as you and I noted, because it caught my attention at first, I said, wait a minute. I thought Trump said he wasn't going to do any more debates. Well, like he said, he's not going to do any more debates. Donald Trump on Saturday rejected a second debate against Kamala Harris before the November 5th election, saying it was too late, with early voting already underway in some states. Yeah, I think, was it Virginia? Actually started on Friday. Harris' campaign said she accepted an invitation from CNN to participate in the debate on October 23rd. It would have been the candidate's second debate after a September 10th encounter that most pundits said she had won. I like how they always sprinkle that in there. The American people deserve another opportunity to see Vice President Harris and Donald Trump debate before they cast their votes, her campaign chair said. I hope Trump will join me. Trump claimed during a campaign rally in the battleground state of North Carolina that he would like to debate, calling it a good entertainment value, but the start of early voting in some states had taken the air out of the idea. It's too late. Voting has already started. He added a large and enthusiastic crowd of supporters that while CNN had been very unfair when he debated Biden in June, they said they were fair. They won't be fair again. Yeah, that was a one and done. They're not going to be fair if it's Trump and Harris. And if you look at the rules, why does he never get to say what the rules are? But I'll continue. Saturday's announcement came as some states have already begun early voting in what is an agonizingly close race. The result is expected to hinge on 7 battleground states, including North Carolina. Trump addressed the crowd in the port city of Wilmington from behind bulletproof glass following an apparent second assassination attempt against him, as we all know. So there you are. He will not debate, and I don't necessarily blame him, but I ask the question to you because there's so few opportunities to see an unscripted, telepromptered Kamala Harris. Would you have liked to seen a second debate? Well, and I know technically it's a third because, as Trump said, we had the first debate with Biden, and then they just decided they didn't want Biden anymore because he did so bad, which isn't really the way the system was meant to work. But that's the way it all went down, and the elites of the Democrat Party got to say who you get to vote for president if you're a Democrat. You got no say, of course, as you know, as a Democrat voter, in who your candidate would be. You actually voted for somebody completely different. You voted for Joe Biden, and now the elites told you no more. And it's now Kamala Harris. So there isn't a lot of opportunities to see Harris on teleprompter. So I would always probably tend or lean towards wanting another debate, but that's not my decision to make. So I'd pose the question to you. What would you like to see? Would you have liked to see another debate? Do you think 2 debates for Trump, 1 for Harris, is enough? I think, and I know it's a different outlet, but those moderators were so biased against Trump. I would be a little trigger shy too. I wouldn't want to go. I wouldn't want to go to another outlet because they're going to do the same thing. I mean, the one moderator admitting that they had practiced and went through scenarios of what Trump could say so that they would be ready with the fact check. They did not do that for Harris, never had any intention to do that for Harris. But they thought that Biden did such a bad job that they didn't want Harris to do the same thing. So they were there to essentially protect her and go after Trump. Very frustrating. We know that. But that's nonetheless what it was. And that's why, and Trump's saying it here, they're not going to be fair. If it's that, especially that close to the election, no. It would be nasty, that's for sure. Okay, we got to take a short break. When we come back, Nancy Ryan, the Director of Development for the Finger Lakes Donor Recovery. So stay with us. This is, Frankly Speaking, here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We will be right back. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Aiken. We're broadcasting from the Hesselson studio, and joining me in that studio is Nancy Ryan, the Director of Development at the Finger Lakes Donor Recovery Network. Thanks so much for being on the show.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. People that have joined this show for any length of period knows that Assemblyman Phil Palmisano comes on the program a lot and talks about the issue of Donate Life. And he's very outspoken about it for obvious reasons. And that's why I'm so glad that you could be a part of the show today. Let's start maybe with the simple question of tell us about the organization itself.
Right. So Finger Lakes Donor Recovery Network is a federally designated organ procurement organization.
Okay.
So we call them OPOs for short. There are 56 OPOs in the country, and there's 4 OPOs in New York State. So we have a federally designated service area we cover. 20 counties in upstate New York. So generally between Rochester and Syracuse, all the way up north to St. Lawrence County and down to Chemung County. So it's a population of a little over 2.5 million people.
But that's a lot of miles on the car.
It is, and we have staff that cover that service area because we partner with 37 hospitals in our service area. Our hospital partners are they're the critical link because they are the ones that actually alert us when they have patients in their hospitals that are approaching death or have already passed away that potentially could give the gift of life through organ and tissue donation.
And that's such a quick process. It is. There's no delay in that, correct?
Yeah, it has to go fairly quickly. And a key element to what we do, too, is actually educating the hospital staff, the doctors and nurses in those hospitals to know what to look for to call us, because we couldn't possibly be in all of our 37 hospitals every day to know who's coming into the emergency department or in the ICU that potentially could give the gift of life.
And let's talk about, because I know when the Assemblyman has been on and other guests that I've had on the program, there are kind of a lot of, what's the word I want to use, like myths, or maybe people don't really fully understand what happens when you become registered and you become an organ and tissue you donate. How do I word that? Explain to me kind of what maybe some of the misconceptions that you've heard through the years.
Sure. So one quick fact for you. So in recent surveys, actually surveys for the last several years, 95% of the U.S. population support donation.
Oh, wow.
They think it's a great thing.
Yeah.
But in the nation, only 66% have signed up. Now, Steuben County is outstanding. 77% of the residents who are old enough to sign up have. But if you think about it, though, still, if there's that discrepancy, right? So many people support donation, but they don't sign up. It's because of those myths and that misunderstanding. I think the first one is, I'm too old, I'm not healthy enough. You won't want my
You
organs,
hear that, I know a lot, yeah.
And the point of this is that you don't have to worry about that. When you're signing up to be a donor, you're just documenting your decision. If upon my death I could give the gift of life through organ and tissue donation, that's what I would want. Physicians, transplant surgeons, they decide on all that could be donated and passed along to others.
Yeah.
That's decided after someone's death. You don't have to worry about that when you're registering. I think the other big thing that seems to, resonate with people is the distrust in thinking that if they show up to the emergency department, the doctor's not going to save my life because they know I'm an organ donor.
Oh, okay.
And I know we get that reaction all
Really?
the time. Like, seriously,
Yeah.
people, you
They
would
took
be
a Hippocratic oath to do the opposite.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Like
okay.
they spent a fortune trying to save people's
Yes,
lives.
yeah.
And the physicians that care for you in the emergency room or in the ICU are completely separate from the transplant surgeons and doctors who perform transplants.
Right.
So totally different care teams. And also too, when you register to be an organ and tissue donor, that donor registration, that data is only accessible by donation agencies like
okay.
Finger Lakes Donor Recovery Network. In other words, the doctors, the nurses at hospitals, they don't have access to this registry.
okay.
They can't look you up.
No.
And they're not looking for your license
No.
either to
No,
see if
no,
that
no.
heart is on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because you look at the numbers, and I know that I keep going back to Phil Pomisano, but he says, heaven forbid or God forbid, you're one of the, in our region, 800 people that need that life-saving organ transplant. I mean, that number is staggering. And like you said, Steuben County itself actually doesn't have bad numbers.
Right.
And then you see how many lives are changed from one donation. And it really opens a lot of eyes. And that's why I'm glad you could be on the program when Phil's on the program, because how important is it from your perspective to register to be a donor?
Oh, it's so important because if you don't make that decision for yourself on your
Right.
own behalf, if something were to happen to you, guess what? Your family's going to have to decide.
Yeah.
And that is the worst possible time. They've just lost a loved one. They're probably in shock. Sadly, most of our organ donors, they've passed away suddenly and tragically. It's been a sudden illness or injury that's brought them to the hospital. So family members, next of kin, they're absorbing this terrible loss, and then they're being asked about organ and tissue donation. Fascinating too that especially if you have a spouse, if their husband or wife wasn't a registered donor and it's up to the other spouse to decide about donation, they are so torn. They don't want to make a decision. I don't know what he would want. I'm going to say no because it's safer, because I'm just not sure that's what he would have wanted. So at the end of the day, if this is something that you want to do, don't delay.
Yeah.
Don't dawdle on it. It's so easy to sign up. We'll get to that in a couple of minutes, but that really is probably the biggest thing, is that it relieves your family from having to make that decision on your behalf.
Because who has that conversation? Who sits around with their spouse and says, do you want to talk about it? I mean, but it's something as simple as getting on your driver's license, or there's other ways, and you can let them know what your decision was. And not have the conversation, right?
That is 50%. Honestly, signing up is great, or putting it in your healthcare proxy or something, all good. But the second step is to tell your family. And even if somebody out there doesn't want to be a donor, tell your family.
Right.
There's no registry of no. You're only signing up to donate, but if it's something you're really passionate about, you could put that you don't want to be a donor in your healthcare proxy, but at the end of the day, either way, tell your family so they know.
And what are your responsibilities if you decide, and we're going to talk about how people register, about what are your responsibilities once you check the box and say, I wanted to donate?
That's all you need to do.
That's it? Okay.
And tell your family. You're done. This is the point. It only takes one time. Yes, an informed decision is so important. That's why I appreciate being here today, Frank, so that we can sort of dispel some of those myths and so on. Make an informed decision. That's what healthcare, this is an end-of-life decision. That's another thing. People don't really associate that. They think do not resuscitate or do not intubate and all those other things. Well, organ and tissue donation is an end-of-life decision. Make your choice. Join the donor registry, and then you're done. Like, go live life to the fullest.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Knowing that if something were to happen to you, that you could pass life on to somebody else. This too brings such peace to families.
Oh, yeah.
We have donor families all the time that tell us this is like this wasn't the end of their loved one's story.
Right.
The accident or the sudden aneurysm or something, their loved one's death wasn't the end, because they're living on and helping others.
Really the beginning for others. And it's what a legacy. Like you said, you check yes and you move on. Well, think about your legacy that you can always have in the back of your head if you're kind of an egomaniac, that I'm going to save lives when it's all over.
Yeah, it's a good feeling. And honestly, families are proud too, knowing that their loved one had signed up, or even if the family authorizes donation, it's just inspiring to know that they've helped so many people. And one donor, you touched base on it, one donor could save up to 8 lives through organ donation.
Wow.
But we haven't even really talked about tissue donation or cornea donation. So they could restore sight to 2 people. One donor could actually help 75 or more people through tissue transplants. And that's, helping repair skin from burn victims, maybe sports injury. Somebody needs donor tissue or tendons or ligaments. Those are all donated tissue.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, first of all, before we talk about the various ways you can register, you mentioned the good numbers of Steuben County. Congratulations to our friends at Steuben County DMV. How exciting. They were awarded the Superstar Award. What does that mean?
Yeah, well, they're one of our best performing DMVs in New York State. So Donate Life New York State has awarded Judy Hunter and her team this wonderful award. Their efforts, especially during April, which is Donate Life Month,
yes, of course,
they up the game. I mean, they're really, they make it fun and interesting. They're sharing information to their DMV customers, and they've done this consistently for years. But it's so great of Donate Life New York State to honor them and bring this award to them. They're so deserving of it. Most of our registered donors do come from the DMV.
Okay, because I think that, to show my ignorance, I kind of assume that's the only place you could go. No. How else? So you can go to the DMV first and foremost.
Yeah.
But where else can you go?
So you can sign up online. That's
I should have thought of that.
Honestly, it takes. That only was a thing since 2017. So,
oh, really? Okay.
Sadly, New York State was one of the last states to do that, but listen, we got it done.
Yeah.
And if you go to passlifeon.org, that's my organization's website. There's an enrollment link right up at the top of the screen. It takes under a minute and a half. It's basic information and so on. So online, I would say is the easiest. Yesterday was voter registration day.
Oh,
right?
yeah, of course, yeah.
New York State's the only state in the country that actually has a question down at the bottom of that voter form asking if you want to register as an organ tissue donor.
That's great, right?
Which is very cool. So no matter where you sign up, DMV, online, voter registration form, even if you receive your health care benefits through New York State, on that enrollment form is the question. All of those registrations from all these different places, they all get filtered into this one database that's overseen by Donate Life New York State and the Health Association here.
Okay.
So, it's all
So there's no
secret.
excuse. If you're thinking about it, it's very simple.
Yeah, it is.
And that's great that you got on the voter registration. That has to be a big move.
Oh, it's cool because we get to partner with like League of Women Voters and other voter, drive folks to stand at a table side by side, and you're enrolling voters, and you're enrolling organ tissue donors. It's a cool partnership, actually.
Well, that's great. So again, passlifeon.org. Well, thanks so much for being on the show. I think we covered everything, right?
I think we did.
There's no excuse for people not to sign up.
Make an informed decision. Do it today, and then, like I said, go live your life to the fullest.
Well, great. Let's have you back on again soon. Maybe in April. How's that?
That sounds great.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. And we are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Thank you so much again for joining us. Thank you to Nancy Ryan, telling us more about Donate Life. A couple comments from viewers. Debate on policy and fact check both of them. Real journalists to question candidates. I don't see that happening, especially as CNN, as Trump said, they were somewhat fair the first time, not going to be if it was that close to Election Day. Another comment. Let her on Fox. I would love to see it. She would never accept that, unfortunately. It's just assumed now. I think it doesn't even have to be said that a Democrat's not going to go on Fox to do a debate, which is kind of weird when you think about when Trump debated on Fox with the other Republicans. Many said that they were very almost extra nasty to Trump at the time, and I would add that I think Fox would want to almost err on the side of being so fair that it could come off hurting Trump in a way. But I don't see it happening, so I don't even know why we're talking about it. Next up, from Ken. I just had a thought. Trump could come out with a plan for the federal government to force New York to allow fracking when he wins the presidency. That way, Harris will also promise it. So either way, we could finally get a little more money infused into New York. Yeah, that would be nice, especially for all the farmers and all the people that were really hoping and banking on that money coming in and then just having it be shot down. Now, I know the media is running with this, and perhaps you've seen it. Somewhat breaking news story yesterday. Former President Donald Trump was asked if he would run in 2028 if he loses the November 5th election. He said, no, I think that'll be it. I don't see that at all. Hopefully we're going to be successful. Now, most polls show Trump running neck and neck against Harris, though the GOP nominee has a history of outperforming surveys. Yes, going back to the fact that people, not everybody, I know it's not everybody, and you can laugh at it and say, I know, I'm proud of it, but there's a lot of people that won't show their support for Trump because they don't want to lose family, friends, their job, perhaps. I was a very consequential president and would certainly be, and maybe even more so this time, Trump declared during the interview. I understand countries, I understand who rips us and who doesn't. This was in an interview with Cheryl Atkinson, who, in full disclosure, I had the pleasure of speaking with, I think twice, many years ago when she released her book. Very interesting story. She has a very interesting story. Trump also suggested there was some benefits of being out of office after losing the 2020 election to Biden. It would have been easier if I did it, contiguous, maybe. But the benefit is more than anything else. It shows how bad they are. It shows how bad this radical left, liberal, crazy philosophy is. During the interview, Trump also said, I have a friend of mine who said to me, why don't you talk about the vaccine? I don't talk about it. I can say this. The Democrats love to claim it. The Republicans don't want to claim it. Overall, I think I did an amazing job with COVID. I never get the credit for it. Did you see the mayor of a Muslim majority Michigan city has endorsed Trump? The mayor of a Muslim majority city in Michigan says he's endorsing Donald Trump, calling the former commander-in-chief the right choice for this critical time. Amir Ghali, mayor of Detroit area suburb Hamtramck, announced his endorsement of Trump on Facebook Sunday. While admitting he and Trump don't agree on everything, he said he regarded the former commander-in-chief as a man of principles. Though it's looking good, he may or may not win the election to be the 47th president of the United States. But I believe he is the right choice for this critical time. I'll not regret my decision no matter what the outcome would be, and I'm ready to face the consequences. For this and for many other reasons, I announce my support and endorsement for the former and hopefully the next president of the United States, Donald Trump. Now let the caravan begin its journey. This is just the starting point, he posted on Facebook. Actor Robert Davi, you may be familiar with, full disclosure, I talked with him one time too, actually. He was asked on Brian Kilmeade's show about all these celebrity endorsements of Harris, Billie Eilish, Chris Rock, Meryl Streep, Oprah Winfrey, Taylor Swift, etc. But not getting the endorsement of the Teamsters Union, because 60% of Teamster Union members supported Trump. So the actor, you may know him from Goonies, Die Hard, License to Kill, he said they're not the rank and file, meaning the actors. They're not the Teamsters that actually make the sets work. The 60% of the Teamsters that are for Donald Trump. So there's a huge disconnect in terms of money and the understanding of what problems our nation faces. He raises a good point. I mean, many of the people endorsing, they don't live the same lives as us, the Chris Rocks, the Meryl Streeps, Oprah Winfrey, Taylor Swift. How can they relate to our economic issues, our not being able to afford groceries, maybe not being able to go on that vacation that you so desperately needed? So it's not about the rank and file. The Democrat Party has been hijacked by an extremely woke ideology from the left, as we've even seen from AOC the other day. The comment on probably one of the biggest interesting combats against terrorism, pagers exploding. She criticized that. Many of the left are doing that and continue to do that. Yeah, can you imagine AOC came out to criticize what was a brilliant, almost spy movie-esque pager attack on Hezbollah? Now, let me say, wow, I got to take a break. Stay with us. Some comments coming in. We'll read your last minute comments. We only got about 15 minutes left, so stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back after this. Back. People are being creative with their waves this morning. Got a Princess Di wave, got a Forrest Gump wave this morning. Interesting. Here's a comment from a viewer. Another sign for me that the economy is poor. More homeless people in Corning. Yet we're seeing in all areas in our surrounding areas. It is. The economy is not great. We know that no matter how many times CNN tells us differently, where they generally get mad at the people they're questioning, saying, no, look at the, like Don Lemon did. No, look at the stats. Okay, I know we can talk more about the presidential race if you'd like to. Feel free to comment at any time. There's a couple of Cuomo things that I've been promising all morning I'd get to. I won't focus entirely on it, folks. But did you see that there were some jokes at Cuomo's expense because his former girlfriend, I don't think they were ever man and wife. His former girlfriend, Sandra Lee, once considered to be the next first lady. When, if you recall, during COVID, some wanted Biden to step aside and have Cuomo take over, remember? Well, Sandra Lee was in D.C. because she has a new role as a member of the White House Historical Association's Board Council. And she even spent the evening at the Landmark at dinner celebrating a new exhibit. An insider snickered to New York Post, saying at least one of them made it to the White House. Oh, ouch. Yeah, I guess a lot of people taking digs at Cuomo, who at one time was believed to be on the short list. But you remember when he was going to run, though, and the ego on him? He was polling under 1%, yet still considering a run. Well, now they're speculating that he's going to run for mayor of New York City. He gave a speech over the weekend slamming progressive policies and even defended law enforcement in a speech against far-left politics. Speaking at the Bedford Central Presbyterian Church in Brooklyn, wow, can you imagine going to church on Sunday and having to hear a political speech? I'm hoping it was after church services, right? Cuomo began by endorsing Vice President Harris, then bad-mouthing the exact policies she supports, apparently. He called her smart and qualified. She's going to unite the Democrats. She's going to bring a new energy. And because the opponent is Donald Trump, and we've seen that, and we're not going back there again, would you, if you are a Democrat, would you want Cuomo's endorsement? I'm not sure. But the Democrat noted that Harris getting into office would solve all our problems because government isn't working for people on a very basic level. So it wouldn't solve all of our problems because government isn't working for people on the very basic levels. So it's about a 6-minute rant against progressive politics. Things are getting worse, not better, Cuomo said. And I think it's time that we take a fresh look and take a new perspective when we look at what's going on. Today, we have a great political argument on the Democrat side. Who is more progressive? I don't even think they know what that word means, progressive. You cannot be a progressive if you don't make progress. And he said the U.S. was going backwards thanks to progressive policies, yet supporting the candidate who pushes progressive policies. Interesting, isn't it? Some people think it's progressives, or that it's progressive to say defund the police. Yes, in theory, if everybody had an education, everybody had a job, nobody would need to commit a crime. I get the theory, but it's not that simple. Defund the police are the 3 dumbest words ever uttered in politics, Cuomo said. Cuomo also called out the migrant issue in New York City, saying that the government can't just have 100,000 migrants coming in New York City and only New York City. Nowhere else in the state of New York, only New York City. And leave it up to New York City to pay for hotels, pay for health care, over $10 billion. No plan by the federal government, no real help from the state. He encouraged the audience to forget the labels and to remember to vote in November. Remember, the only question that matters, who is going to help you and your family and who's going to get the job done? Why would we think that Harris would help our families after 3.5 years of not doing so? Now, we know during the Trump administration, we could actually afford groceries. It didn't break your heart to fill up your gas tank, et cetera, et cetera. They want us to ignore that, the peace and prosperity aspect of it, where we weren't concerned about the Middle East exploding. We weren't concerned about the beginning of World War III, for instance. We know that Russia wasn't in Ukraine. The list can go on. And then they want us to ignore that we were economically prosperous. We were doing very well. So they want to ignore the last 3.5 years. Even Tim Walz doing so. Not wanting to mention that, yes, Harris has indeed overseen what has been a disaster for so many Americans. One last thing about Cuomo. Yes, I have enough time here. Enraged families of COVID-19 victims are calling for former Governor Andrew Cuomo to face charges after recently surfaced emails contradict what he told a congressional panel about nursing home deaths. Peter Urbini, Vivian Zayas, and Janice Dean. Now, Janice Dean works for Fox. She's been very outspoken on this. She lost her in-laws, both of them, to COVID, and they couldn't see them, and she has not backed down. I'm sure none of those people are, but Janice Dean has maybe been kind of the most, that has the soapbox, if you will. They're asking the U.S. Department of Justice to probe Cuomo, arguing he lied to congressional investigators about a state report that lowballed deaths in nursing homes at the height of this pandemic. This is one of the worst, most tragic scandals in my lifetime politically. Cuomo had initially claimed he had not seen the report, but a bombshell new report appeared to show that he not only knew about it, but had edited it himself. We call on the Department of Justice to launch a full and fair investigation into Andrew Cuomo's statements to Congress, his coordination with other witnesses, and his role in covering up the nursing home death tolls. It is found that he knowingly misled Congress and the American people or interfered with the congressional inquiry. He must be held accountable under the law, the statement went on. The families who lost loved ones deserve the truth, and the public deserves to know that no one is above the law, especially those entrusted with public office. In June, Cuomo had downplayed any involvement in a state Department of Health report released in July of 2020 that undercounted the number of nursing home deaths. But uncovered emails in a New York Times report showed that Cuomo had been suggesting edits to the report prior to its release, inserting language that blamed nursing home staff, the frontline workers. It was so despicable. I remember when he started blaming he would blame everybody. And visiting families, remember that, for spreading the virus and contributing to the deaths? So it was the families that wanted to see their loved ones. It was the nursing home employees that were working overtime and just drained to the max. It was their fault, not Governor Cuomo's. A Cuomo spokesperson said the latest criticism was politicizing the pandemic, which is all Cuomo did during the pandemic. But anyway, he also asserted that Cuomo had later told House investigators during the same interview that he did not recall the details of the surrounding editing of the report. We are long past the point of absurd, Rich Azzopardi, Cuomo's spokesperson, said. We sympathize with every one of the 1 million plus families who lost loved ones, but the continued attempts to purposely distort and politically weaponize this pandemic are both transparent and sad. Cuomo hadn't been sworn in under oath for his testimony, but officials told him he would be prosecuted if he knowingly made false statements. I've stood with the families of nursing homes and will continue to stand with them to hold the former governor accountable, said Assemblyman Ron Kim. Ron Kim is really when the train started going off the tracks, if you recall. He was a Democrat, and he didn't like what he was seeing from the Cuomo administration when it came to nursing homes, and he called him out. Andrew Cuomo has consistently lied and gaslit the public in pursuit of his book deal and political ambitions, Kim said. Now we must hold him accountable and seize this opportunity to fix our broken long-term care system. City Councilman Lincoln Ressler wrote in a statement that it was clear that Cuomo's testimony before the House was misleading and inaccurate. Time and again, he reveals himself to be someone New Yorkers cannot trust and who does not belong in public office. Yes, we're running late. Stay with us. There's your Cuomo updates. We got a few things we're going to rush through right here at the end, so get those last-minute comments in, and we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking after this. We are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Wrapping up today's edition of Frankly Speaking, here's a comment from a viewer, and it's heartbreaking, and I've heard this sentiment from so many other people. I retired at the end of 2019, at which time I could have lived comfortably. Now I'm broke. Exactly. I'm sorry to hear that, but I've heard that from so many others. We were at a time of peace and prosperity, and that all went down the drain for the last 3.5 years, and we are to ignore the fact that Harris has been in there the last 3.5 years. Now, speaking of something completely unrelated, how was that for a segue? Congress has one more week in session to avert a government shutdown. Congress has just 5 days to find an agreement on funding the government at the start of the new fiscal year on October the 1st. If no deal can pass the Republican-held House and Democrat-controlled Senate by then, thousands of federal employees could be furloughed and multiple government programs temporarily shuttered. The horror. Both Republicans and Democrats agree that some sort of short-term extension of this year's fund, called a continuing resolution, is needed to buy negotiators more time. They differ on how to get there. Now we learn the Speaker Johnson has unveiled a short-term spending bill urging members to avoid a shutdown, especially right before the election, folks. I'm not normally one that's opposed to government shutdowns. I just don't want this to be nonstop. The focus of the media, blaming Trump, blaming Republicans. Johnson's plan, known as a limited continuing resolution, would fund the government until December 20th, right around Christmas time. That'll be fun. And include $230 million for Secret Service funding. Next week, the House would take the initiative and pass a clean 3-month CR to prevent the Senate from jamming us with a bill loaded with billions in new spending and unrelated provisions. Our legislation will be a very narrow, bare bones continuing resolution, including only the extensions that are absolutely necessary. While this is not the solution any of us prefer, it is the most prudent path forward under the present circumstance. As history has taught and current polling affirms, shutting the government down less than 40 days from a fateful election would be an act of political malpractice. From now until Election Day, I will continue with my tireless efforts and singular focus of growing our majority for the 119th Congress. Can you imagine the coverage of this? But then, why do they always put them around dates like, for instance, December 20th? So they have this whole argument again right before Christmas, and you hear the whole thing. They're not going to let them go back before Christmas if they don't get something done. It's just all so predictable, always the same. But we are out of time for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Thank you to everybody who joined us again. Thank you to everybody donating. Walk to End Alzheimer's. There's my award, my medal. Thank you so much. Everybody donated it and made Big Fox, Team Big Fox, a part of the Champions Club. Really appreciate it. Join us tomorrow, because that's when we'll be back. Every weekday morning starting at 6 with Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV. Big Fox, have a great day, everyone. We will see you tomorrow morning bright and early. I look forward to it already.